Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, I am online.
Welcome. And with your support, Becky.
Yeah, it's my life.
Hello, welcome along. So you're going to give us a presentation on biochar. And
Recording in progress.
Wave if you're muted.
Yes, I can hear you all. Thank you.
Sounds like you're underwater.
The sound quality is not good at all.
Yeah, no,
But you aren't.
Is that me? I'll just turn it off. Oh, I quite like that. No, it's from Star Wars or something. That's it. Good. Obviously, do with the loose. I'll say it.
Oh, it's all right. No, don't put it on. Don't put it on.
Put it small up here.
I'll dump it on when you
Over.
come back after the induction.
What we got on there?
I'll make a cheat from them.
I'm only going to be able to do it fast enough on that.
Right, that's it. I'll start. We'll set the test us. So, welcome Dylan, and we've got Noel here as well, who's going to give us a longer presentation. And we want to follow this earlier presentation. So the floor's yours, Dylan.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thanks for having me. And I've got to try and talk to here as well, do I?
I'll move out.
I don't know if everyone can see. I'm not going to stand up because then I feel like I'm back at school. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you guys about biochar. And biochar basically is when you got biomass, so for example, wood, and it's heated, usually by fire, in a process called pyrolysis. So that then separates out all the volatiles, the gases come out and burn. So that's what you see in the yellow flame. And if it's done right by controlling the air either naturally or by forced control of the air, what we can do is we can get a result of really a high carbon product. So something kind of like charcoal, but it's a bit different. Charcoal is normally done at a lower temperature. So that high carbon material that comes out at the end is very long lived. It only can be broken down by further burning. It doesn't naturally decay, or it does at a very, very slow rate. where all those volatiles have been burnt out of, there's a lot of nanotubes. So at a nanoatomic scale, it's got lots and lots of tubes. And it's those tubes that make biochar hold a lot of water. Basically, it acts like a sponge. It holds 3 times its own weight in water. And it is also basically a hotel for biology, for bacteria and fungi. So there's places in there for them to go in and live. It is also very good at holding nutrient because it's got a really high cation exchange capacity. So it's really good to hold nutrient, and plant roots can go down into those tubes and access that nutrient, access the water, and so on. What else can I say about that? It's good for sandy soil or clay soil. So in sandy soil, because it's holding the water, that then benefits the soil. In clay soil, it's improving the structure, allowing it to drain better, but also allowing it to have a bit more air in it. Then what did I want to talk about after that? I'm condensing what I normally talk about in a workshop from 2 hours down to 5 minutes. What was I going to talk about next year?
The benefits.
Yeah.
And how to make them.
Yeah, all right. So how to make it. Basically, in Southland, I see landholders having big stacks of wood that gets burnt pretty much around this time of the year. Unfortunately, it's burnt with a lot of pollution, air pollution, a lot of smoke. So one other thing I would like to advocate today is a method of burning from the top down. So lighting the fire at the top of the stack and allowing it to burn downwards. That means that the air comes in from underneath. So it's actually called top lit updraft. And the air coming in underneath pushes the smoke up through the flames at the top. And so the smoke gets burnt as the whole pile is burning down. Normally, people burn by lighting at the bottom, and the flames are going up, heating all the wood slowly, and that's what causes all the smoke that's coming up. So you burn at the top, going down, the smoke gets pushed up through the flames and gets burnt. So it reduces the smoke really significantly. And then landholders, if they're knowing about what biochar is, then all they need to really do is have a water source, or it can be put out by soil as well. So a way when the fire's got down to the ember stage, the flames have really just decreasing down, then it can be extinguished, quenched with water or soil. And then they will be left with a high carbon product, what we call biochar. For it to be really useful, it could then be inoculated with nutrients and with biology. Okay, depending on the use of what it's going to be used for. If it's going to be used in the soil as a way to actually hold nutrient, prevent nutrient from leaching, then you probably wouldn't put the nutrient in before application. But if you want to actually put it into, say, tree plantings, then you would put the nutrient in there for the trees then to get that nutrient as they start growing. So I see it having a lot of benefits. It can be used in composting situations. It will hold on to more of the nutrients in the compost and any volatiles in there. So reduce the methane by something like 87%, is what I've read in the research. It can be fed to livestock, also reducing methane emissions by at least 9% to 9% or more. And obviously it can be applied by top dressing directly to the soil. Like I said, a tree planting, it could be used in livestock barns and for the bedding material. Obviously, if we can feed it through animals, then it goes out into their manure, and then dung beetles and worms will take it down into the ground for us as well. So multiple benefits there. And I think that's pretty much, it's probably my 5 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Any questions? No, Eric?
Yeah, interesting. What sort of an application rate per hectare are you talking about with this product to get some of the advantages you're talking about?
A lot of the research is even at very low rates of 0.5% as a minimum. So if you apply more, you get more of a benefit, but they're able to detect
Yeah,
it.
what does 5% mean? I'm talking how many tons per hectare would I need to, or kilograms per hectare would I need to look at to do this?
Depends exactly what you want to do and what you want to make the biochar from. The feedstock is quite important. Obviously, every tree is different, the way it grows, and therefore what's in it at that burn stage. And so the char does vary. The what did I say, 0.5% is normally by volume. So if you think about your topsoil being, I don't know, 30 centimeters deep.
Not where I am, it isn't.
Well, then you maybe need more. Yeah. But I mean, if your topsoil is sort of like that, then by 0.5% of the volume of that topsoil. So, yeah, I mean, adding sort of an inch deep at the top.
It's a lot of biochar.
It is quite a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot of biochar.
So this is something to do sort of over periods of time. It's not going to be a one application and it's done. This is something that needs to be done over time and to try and use up the biomass we have. But I mean, the future is going to be in wood. And so we're going to need more trees on farms anyhow. So, you know, fodder trees, coppicing trees, and that kind of thing. And then if you're using fodder trees to feed livestock, reducing the amount of baleage, then you'd have all the sticks and branches left. That would then be your biochar material. Yeah. So it would be I mean, in the medium term, it's about changing systems slowly to get a different way of doing the whole cycling of nutrients and kind of ultimately the benefit is, and that this is, I guess, why you guys meet, is to mitigate climate. The carbon is sequestered into the soil for at least 100 years. So for the carbon markets worldwide, they're saying 100 years conservatively, but realistically it's thousands of years because they've been able to find soils in South America, in Russia, where that was done tens of thousands of years ago. The burnings were done and they can still measure the carbon there in the soil. So, yeah.
Okay, Phil.
Thanks, John. I've watched a few of the YouTube videos based on the links you sent us, and YouTube obviously offers lots more once you've watched a couple. I'm really curious in terms of how do you take this to a scale? How do you scale it up as a land user in Southland without having to invest in infrastructure from the outset? Because I'm thinking of, you know, I've got family who are farming, and if they burn a pile of timber, then I'm thinking that if they're going to use it, they're probably going to use tractors powered by diesel to move stuff around. I'm just wondering about what are the processes for effectively using it at scale without doing more damage, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the farmers, the landholders are already putting all that wood in a stack and then burning it. And unfortunately, they're burning it when it's green, when it's wet. So the timing of the burning is critical. And obviously, if you want to harvest the most biochar possible, the timing of that becomes even more relevant. But yeah, most of that's been done. And that is the lowest tech way, is literally just to light it, like I said, on the top. You could also dig a hole with 60-degree sides, and they found that the 60-degree side causes vortices to happen so that it sucks the smoke back in. And so there's a method there that, again, they could either put a big stack in the hole, or they can make the hole and make a fire in the bottom and then just keep adding material to it. So as it's really burning, you add more material, and that restricts the air going in. So it's still our pyrolysis thing happening. And so it could be, you know, machine dropping stuff into a big hole. And so then large amounts of biomass can be processed relatively quickly. And
I guess the plan ahead, you do this burning adjacent to where you think you'll need it to be applied. So
yeah. then there's other systems. There's a ring of fire system where there's basically just sheets of metal that get just bolted together. And so you get a big ring, probably half the size of this table. And it's got another ring around the outside to give it some insulation and protect people working around it. And that again, fire is made in the middle and wood is just added and added and added. And that's probably human scale, but with a small excavator, it could probably also be done by one person with a machine, just slowly putting stuff in. And over a day's work, they would get 700 liters of char, which probably, I don't know, 250, 300 kilos. Yeah, it's not significant to put it out on pasture, but if you're using it for composting or tree planting, then that's quite a reasonable amount of char. Yeah.
I've got a question from Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks, Dylan. This biochar is genius. There's no question about it. And you mentioned a little bit about the history. You didn't say terra preta, I don't think, but you talked about other societies and civilizations that have employed these techniques that you were talking about. And the question about moving raw wood around and the waste that might, if you're using diesel to do that, can be answered when you look at some of those older societies where people that was their dedicated job, charcoal making, and they built their charcoal burning facility just as they went on site. So there's employment in this for people in Southland, particularly if we're growing more trees. But the genius of it is turning wood into a long-term carbon source that you then sequester in the soil. It's beyond clever, really. Have you thought about a dedicated industry that looks at either slash or forestry, standing trees, and moves through those forests, converting wood into charcoal and then applying it either to the soil there and then, or making it available for other industries such as farming?
Yeah, it's been done already in the US. There's the forestry service there is paying for these large, it's kind of like a big rubbish skip, that same kind of thing. All these ring of fire that I mentioned, that's been developed to be a better alternative to the skip. And they're literally taking them into the forestry area and using them to take all that forestry slash. And most of the time they're just putting it straight out back to the forest.
Yeah.
See, if everyone's arriving there in a vehicle, they could be taking it away and selling it. It will become a valuable product for sure. I did say in the medium term that landholders now could be just burning their stacks in a better way and using it. But I think in medium to longer term, we also need to think about the wood chipping and the biomass industries that are already starting now, and they're going to come. To me, that doesn't make so much sense because it's using a lot of fossil fuels to cut the tree, chop it up, to transport it, and there is an opportunity in those biomass boilers and those burners to sacrifice maybe 20 or 30% of the heat energy you're going to get out of it, so that we get a percentage of char coming out, and effectively all those biomass burners then become biochar producers. And hopefully they get paid by the voluntary carbon markets or by the non-voluntary ones, because there's probably going to be compulsory ones coming. And so there's going to be, I think, an easy solution there is just to tweak the biomass burners, sacrifice 20%, and then make more money out of the char that you sell back for other benefits than the 20-30% you've sacrificed by your energy. I don't know if that kind of...
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think just to add one little thing more, when you combine your idea here with the idea of coppicing, rather than growing pines to full size and then have all the difficulties that puts in front of you in terms of harvesting and machinery and so on, grow a tree, a different tree, that can be coppiced, that is cut and then regrow endlessly. You're producing lignin wood, which you're then turning into charcoal, carbon, and putting it in the ground. Genius. That's the way forward. Huge potential for Southland in particular. Thank you very much, Dylan, and thank you, Evita.
Very welcome.
We'll have one more question, then we must move on, I'm afraid, but we've got to finish on Peter.
I was going to add to what Robert was saying, that there's one important step in there that I think is that cutting the coppicing and feeding it to animals first is key, because then that can reduce the amount of baleage that we're doing. And to me, I don't know if you've discussed this or not, but to me, baleage isn't that environmentally friendly, because you've got to cut it with a machine pass, then you've got to put it in a row, second machine pass, then you've got the baler cart, then you move it into storage, and then you move it again to feed it out. So you've got 5 machine passes for baleage. I can't see that as being environmentally friendly in the future if we try to decarbonize farming, whereas someone paid to go around on their bicycle or on a quad bike and basically with a handsaw go and cut the trees, animals come and feed it, and then all you have to do after that is pick it up, maybe with a trailer on the back of your quad bike, and then take that to wherever you're processing your biochar. Or trucks are coming around and pick that biomass up for it to be chipped and used in biomass boilers. Ultimately, we need to get to that scale where there is a truck coming weekly to pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, really interesting, Dylan, and of course I think always of application and scalability, and we know there's a huge amount of thinning to waste going on, and always has in plantation forestry. And maybe there's an opportunity, you know, most forestry get planted, say, for over 1,000 stems per hectare, but get harvested around the 300 to 400 maximum. So it's quite ironic on the better country that we're really worried about trees going, and that's got the more potential for using those thinnings in a commercial way. But I just want to ask about the potential for denitrification. And of course, that's a huge challenge for this council to around the province. And if there could be identified, well, there will be identified areas that have more acute problems with nitrates, if we could apply this technology that you're talking about to those areas in terms of some sort of fertilizer that could help with that, but also help with carbon sequestration too. So there's certainly potential to think about this and how it could evolve as time goes on.
Right, thanks. So I do have to wrap this up, but Dylan, I'd like you to give us a recommendation, if you can, of what action you think this council should take in relation to this topic.
I mean, the quickest, easiest thing I think to do is an education, bringing awareness to the landholders that there is perhaps a better way to burn.
Yeah.
Burning from the top down. I don't know if you're putting ads out, making a video of it or something, I don't know, but the way I see burning done, it's terrible for air pollution, and smoke is unburned carbon, and that's unhealthy and a waste. It's basically changing the mindset that piles of wood trash is a resource, it's not a waste. And at the moment, they just put a match to it because that's the easiest way to get it out of the way so they can grow a bit more grass there. We need to see it as a valuable resource that can be used for something really important. Of course, it'd be nice if there were incentives. That's probably something in the medium term, maybe to kind of how do we put a price on it? How do we give it value by saying this is, I mean, the international carbon markets are coming, they're already there, it's coming already through voluntary, but it's obviously the future is it's going to come mainstream, because if we don't, New Zealand as a country is going to have to pay money to the international global system if we're not doing enough to mitigate That's what I see. So we might as well be taking that money now and incentivize the farmers to do the plantings of the trees, use up the waste, get people into the forestry and use their waste, because all the trees thinned, they go down to the ground. Yes, they're part of the natural carbon cycle, but they basically over time will just release all that carbon back to the air, which again, terrible waste when it could be put sequestered down, could be used.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot of support here for what you're saying, and you'll follow that up with some action along the lines you suggest. We'll see what we can do along those lines. Certainly think there's a lot of support for what you're saying. So thank you very much for coming today. It's been very good.
Thank you.
Educational, very appropriate with the Climate Change Commissioner's report that's coming out yesterday.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that you're saying are relevant to that. So that's really good. So I'll run out of time. Everything is.
Well, I was just going to say an action would be, I'd like to see a working model set up somewhere, and that might be something that you could go and initiate.
I'd be happy to get involved with
Yeah.
anything.
That's what we need to see.
Yeah.
We've got the concept, but we need to see it working.
If anyone's got some burn piles on their property and they want me to come and have a look, I mean, we could set up some filming and film them and burn one at the bottom, burn one at the top, and see the difference. Yeah.
Just seduce the voluntary thriving south, and I might be aware of the group. You talk about emerging carbon markets. They are being approached now by people looking that have trying to develop these trading platforms. So that could be a report to talk about.
All right. And I'm available if you want me to come back and give any long kind of explanations or do a workshop with staff, with yourselves, anybody. What I love doing. So
or as we come into the, sorry, Chairman, as we come into the egg shed season, some of the small holdings around the city boundaries would actually be a really good opportunity to run a demonstration or something.
Yes. Yeah. Demonstration is great.
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Right, confirmation of the minutes. Of the 15th of March meeting. Should we like to move
To the chair, can I just say I don't know how my apology didn't arrive here. But I didn't just not turn up. I was on cloud control and I did order apology. I never made it this far, but I would like to recognise that I wasn't laying at home in my bed.
Right, thank you. Yes, I didn't notice that, we didn't see that for some reason, so we can.
Yeah, you can have that.
With that change,
That we move and second it to change that.
Yep.
So that we report apology. Thank you, all those in favour of this,
Right.
it's carried. Any urgent business, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any. Or questions, but I don't have a chairman's report. No, ordinary urgent business. So we move on to reporting. This item, that one. It's your time now, Noel.
Okay.
So, welcome. And the floor is yours for the next 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, staff, for the opportunity. As you probably know, it's a passion of mine, has been for many years, since about 1975. Get the message about climate change through, and the preamble that you see at the beginning of what I presented pretty much covers the ground. I think as to where we need to go, and I already see good signs that that's already happening. So I say thank you, and I'll lead on from where I left off with Councillor Ludlow asking me a question, which was if we had a climate education hub, what would be the priority? And I went away and I laid in bed quite often and thought for many hours about that. And also the world has evolved, and what's happening with climate change has evolved. And I finally decided yesterday that the main priority is actually to get a climate change education hub on the road, get it going. I think that's the key to the whole thing. And then what I would add to that is that there seems to be in Southland is an interesting area, because as I said at the last meeting, we sort of live in this sweet zone where it's not too hot, not too cold, and there's plenty of resources, there's plenty of rain, plenty of sunshine. And a lot of people are confused about it, and they don't believe that there is any problem whatsoever. And in fact, there's a group of people that are doing a lot of damage because they deliberately and concertedly put out misinformation and deny that there's any problem. I have a chap that every time I post something about climate change, he lives locally, he puts a laughing emoji on my pages because he thinks it's funny, and he's got a great following of thousands of people that think that he's right. So I think the other, a priority will be to actually put out solid information and challenge the people that are in the denial situation. And then to add to that, I think what I do in my spare time is I go and I spend what money I have at charity shops, I give to charity, and I talk to people while I'm there. And what I discovered, I was talking to a lady in a charity shop yesterday, and that she thinks that it's too late, and she's got no money, so what can she do about it? She can't buy a car, and she can't do this, she can't do that. So there's a lot of people that are resigned to thinking that there's nothing they can do, and that's something important that an education hub needs to be able to give the message through that there's actually a whole lot of positive stuff in it. There's actually not only are we going to save the planet so that we can continue living on it, we're actually going to make it possible for people to have lots of jobs and will actually have an easier lifestyle than we've perhaps got at the moment, So I think the two priorities there are to target the denialists and to target the people that aren't educated. And that's actually going to be a tricky thing to do, because a lot of people, they don't have computers, they don't have Facebook. They read the newspaper, but they don't take any notice of what it says about climate change, et cetera, and et cetera. But a lot of people just switch off. But we really got to get everybody on board on the boat. That's on the waka. And then we can't turn the waka around if we don't have everybody on board, if we're still waiting for people to get on. So I think that that's an important thing to do. And as I say towards the end of that intro, it'll take time and effort, but it's urgent. And you've only got to read Dr. Carr's report or listen to what he's saying on the radio today, or what the Minister for Climate Change is saying, Mr. Shaw. We haven't got time to muck around. We've actually got to get on to it. So, and finally, on that intro, what I would say is, I listened to Jacinda Ardern with her valedictory speech when she was leaving Parliament, and she said that she wished that politics could be taken out of climate change. And I've actually been involved in politics since 1975 when I first walked into Parliament. And I, got mixed up with different parties at different times in my life. But probably 20 years ago, I decided to become bipartisan. And by that, I don't take sides with any particular party. I pick out the good from all of the different parties. And if we can't get over that bridge, we're actually going to, if we're going to sit and sling mud at each other and be opposed, oppositional politics, it's just not going to work. We've actually got to come together, so, and be collective. So, you know, and she says debate is critical to a healthy democracy, but conspiracy is the nemesis. And that's why I'm saying we've got to go out after those guys that are causing problems with the misinformation. So I'll just move on, and Chair, if you tell me when you've had enough, and I've actually broken this down into two documents. There's one about climate change and one about biofuel, because I know that there were some questions about that, and I wanted to be clear what my opinion is. So you'll see there's conversations on climate. You know, there's great opportunity to hop on board with particularly the Kapiti Coast Council. And I think maybe that's already happening. Christchurch City is actually well ahead in the area of organics and permaculture, which is, you know, Councillor Guyton would probably know all about that. So we've actually got a stronghold in Riverton, and I confess to being involved in some of that as well. Wellington City Council and Dunedin City Council, they're also working towards things in the climate area, and interestingly, albeit that they're not regional councils, the district and city council, they're actually diversifying into many other things, which is what I was suggesting in my lead-in. Is that, you know, it's been easy, I guess, for regional council to have its blinkers on, particularly where you live on a piece of land which is basically a floodplain, and your biggest concern is keeping the water in the right place at the right time. So I saw that. I'm just going to go through and comment on things that I put up for you, and I'll make the point that a lot of the information that I put here, I don't need to come back and tell you another dozen times, because a lot of the information is actually crystal clear. It's just a matter of regurgitating it. But like Paulina Aldance, who's the editorial lead for Climate Champions, you know, she actually knows her stuff, and like she's poses answers to that question that I put to you at the meeting prior. Why are we in this state of paralysis? Why are we not able to get on with things? And like, yeah, that's a good article to read. Treasury's claiming that we're in a good position to cope with all the costs and all the changes. But then you've got Professor Alan Noy, the inaugural chair of economics of disasters and climate change at Victoria University, saying that they're undertaking a mission that's almost impossible to do, and without a crystal ball, and they don't have crystal balls. So it may not be correct in what they're saying. He's questioning that. New Zealand faces a mounting climate crisis as evidence of environmental and economic impacts emerges. You know, the pipe is coming to call. And like, you know, I'll make the point there that, you know, we're one of the top 5 emitters in the OECD, you know, per capita. We're the best off people in the world, you could say. And we're, even though we're only a small percentage, we're not really playing our part. And the pipe, as I say, the pipe is coming. And the economic repercussions are coming. You know, how the heck are we going to rebuild all this? What is being suggested is going to take some sacrifices in other areas. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, is you know, there's an article there saying that it's a climate time bomb, and I remember coming and saying it's like World War III. You know, we've actually got to get past that being comfortable and thinking, oh, climate change, it's not going to be a SUV and go home and have a wine and watch TV and go to bed and come back to the same thing. You know, it's yeah. Rod Card, a while back, what a note there, New Zealand urged not to drop the climate war in the wake of the latest report. UN report, countries recognise they have to act on climate change, and that's where we're at the moment. We're in that recognising stage. We're in that, and like, you know, Rod Card's really strengthening what I just said about, you know, being well-to-do people in the world. You know, just because we're small isn't an excuse for not doing something. And in fact, he was on the radio this morning, and like he's talking about carbon credits and planting trees, and there's quite a bit of confusion around that. But he's making it clear that sure, carry on planting trees, but we've also got to make changes to the way that we live our lives, and we've got to cut back the emissions that we're producing. And in fact, it was interesting, he made a comment that there was 4 billion hectares, I think he means 4 million hectares of available land suitable for planting trees in New Zealand. So they're saying, you know, it's a matter of balance. If we plant too much, well then, yeah. And like it's there's a good reason why farmers are turning to trees. It's very economic at the moment. You know, you rely a lot on a report from 2018 for your information. There's a noting here of an important video presented to Parliament in March 2023. The New Zealand Ministry for the Environment, an up-to-date New Zealand overview, and that's dated the 9th of March 23. So, and it's a Facebook link, but if you can get onto it, you go for it, because it'll actually upgrade your thinking with what's going on. There's a lot of debate going on about green growth, which is, you know, what biochar, and I was impressed with what Ryan was saying. I've been involved in permaculture for many years, and I've always been skeptical about burning things, providing CO2 etc. out into the environment instead of capturing it. And I've watched people on small, you know, working with small scale biochar projects for many years. And yeah, sure, it works. And I think where it might be good is actually to burn the material and put the biochar into potting mixes to grow plants. Like, as Ryan was saying, you know, one guy can do a small scale thing and produce 400 kilos or so of biochar a day. Well, you know, if you mix that in with your potting mix, it's giving you the bulk, and it's also giving you that carbon. I have used it in that situation in the nursery as a side track. But there's a lot of talk also about a subject called degrowth. And I've put some links there, and there's quite a few of them about degrowth, whether it's wrong or right, and you know, a lot of degrowth people challenge the green growth people, and saying that, you know, you're doing more harm than you're doing good, and we'll all have to go back and live in caves. But no, we don't. I think that there's a balance between the two. And it's very fluid. There's a lot of discussion about it at the moment, and I'd be a little wary. There is some people that are, in my opinion, being rather overzealous with their degrowth ambitions, rather than accepting that green growth is good as well. they're talking about having total degrowth and no green growth. Like, yeah, so just take it with an open mind again. Down near the bottom of that, you'll see there's a thing called talking degrowth. Unbelievable how this plastic packaging can help change the climate. The Green Wizard reveals all, by Kaylee's reaction. It was actually a self-produced, on the spur of the moment thing between me and Kaylee Hall, local artist. He started a YouTube channel, and he asked me some questions about climate change to do with degrowth, and you know, there's lots of practical things with degrowth that we can do as individuals, which I think will work, and that's worth a little look. There's a page called Climate, which I run on Facebook, and I keep it up to date with the latest news. And funny enough, the news is slowed up of late, but then you get periods of latency like this. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff. You get inundated with stuff, and then it slows up. There's my notes from the last meeting, and there's a video there talking to the Wellbeing Committee, and I do recommend you watch that, because I was actually not so happy with the way that meeting went. I just felt that they went on board yet. I do hope they do get there. Is it time for responsible action on climate change? There's a councillor from New Plymouth District Council, Chair of Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. She's put out a very good article, so that would be good for you. Behaviour, NZ attitudes and behaviours towards climate change, really worth looking at if you're into facts and figures. Let's have a look down here.
Just got about another 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. I was actually, I can't put my finger on it here directly, but the staff may have been doing. There's actually a article there on degrowth, which is for professionals, like people that are running councils or such like. And I do recommend that would probably lead you in the right direction. So, and then I guess, seems as I've only got 5 minutes, I won't dig any further. I recommend that you keep digging for yourself when you've got the time. If you're in the mood to learn more about climate change, I think I've put a story together that will help. That's what I'm hoping. I'll just mention the biofuels situation. I think that and I think Dr. Carr would concur, if you start burning anything, whether it's wood, coal, gas, it doesn't really matter. Petroleum, you're still contributing to the CO2 methane emission process. And like there seems to be quite a bit of confusion there about, and there's articles in the links, you'll see where I put that biofuels, that suggests that it's quite fine, and then there's others that say that it's not the right way to go. And I perhaps in Southland we're using sawdust chips from sawmills, and it does work out that it's a good balance. But if we're going out and harvesting whole trees and all the rest, well, then I very much doubt it. And finally, I'd just like to give a plug of with your diversity and your education programs. If you get this hub going, do focus on the permaculture and the organics and the growing the food, and putting out some money to those groups that are actually trying to develop that kind of process. particularly in the city where the majority of people live, and the majority of people that haven't got the wherewithal. And I'll bring it up here just as a final thing. About a year and a half ago, I went down to the old Stead Street tip, and I saw there's a processing plant next to where they grind up all the green waste and they put it in the windrows and they compost it all. And anyway, I discovered there was a muddy track went from where they process the materials all the way around to a very sort of secluded area of the tip site. And there must have been, I don't know, 1,000 tons or more of mature made compost piled up there, like they had nowhere else to put it. They didn't know what to do with it. And the smell was actually wafting across to the houses across the road. And but you couldn't see it unless you walked down this muddy track.
You smell it right now, right across the whole South City.
And I don't know whether the top of the rubbish dump's the right place to be doing it, but I also thought that, I saw in America and Australia and in some of the European countries, councils actually provide that material for free to people that have gardens in towns and cities and whatnot. So that, if they've got a 1/4 acre section or 1/2 acre section, they can have a couple of ton of compost dropped off, and they're right as rain, and they should process their own green waste on their own property. But there's that big pile of stuff there, and I actually mentioned it to one of the MPs, and she said, "Oh no, the city council might want to use that in their gardens." Well, 1,000 tons, and it's not being used, and it's being bagged up and flogged off. It's being sold, and I think that for community good, it should actually be given out. Thank you for your time, and I'll leave it there.
Well, I've got a question from Robert, who was first to just hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Noel. That was a real smorgasbord. But I'd like to go back to the first couple of minutes, which is all I can usually handle. You made two very important points. The most important one, I think, was with regard your idea about an education hub. And you mentioned a woman in an op shop and her feelings of disempowerment. I think that is where Environment Southland should strike first. We can do that. We can talk to people and with very simple proposals, suggestions and examples of things they can do, because one of the most important issues we're going to face is not all this technical stuff, not all this scientific stuff, but mental health and how people cope when more of these events unfold. And I think that is the public service we could be most effective at. And in order to do that, we're going to need to dismiss the negativeness and all of the arguments, and they're very good arguments sometimes, about why we shouldn't be doing anything at all because we're too small and so on and so on. So that's the first thing. The second thing relates to that, and my question is, will follow, but it's with regard those agents who are actively undermining belief and confidence in the climate change phenomenon. And our own council spoke a lot about this yesterday, experience they had recently where those groups turned up and actively tried to demolish the position. You know who I'm talking about. These are the counterspin. These are, who they are, Voices for Freedom. And Eric mentioned yesterday one of their key figures who he saw at Lumsden. Those people are actively working against us, I believe, and yet we're passively not really doing anything about it. What would you suggest, what would your approach be with regard those people who are funded and motivated to convince people that climate change is nonsense? What would you do?
Robert, I think that I'd be, as I mentioned and what I suggested, I'd actually have like a climate change newspaper, and I'd replace this thing that arrives in my letterbox all stuck together every time, with a weekly thing, and I would focus on and actually rebuking, rebuttal, a determined rebuttal program of what those people were doing, like actually put them in their place.
Michael?
It's like, thanks for that, Noel. I guess a couple of questions. I guess if we set up a hub, I think we need to have a few simple things for a start that people can latch on to. So that would be practical. Just interested in your views. You mentioned per capita. I get quite frustrated with emissions being calculated per capita because actually, say India is about to become the largest population in the world. Because their population's increasing per capita, it looks like they're good, whereas actually the biggest climate change problem we've got is an increasing population.
Yeah, in actual fact, from what I understand, the global population is actually going to start to drop. And I think that I understand your frustrations, but we've all actually got to do it. We've all got to do our bit in mitigation. And the biggest concern that I have with us not doing that as a nation, I'm talking about New Zealand here, is the repercussions on a global economic platform, which is something that you would also be concerned about, of not being able to market our products because we haven't actually made the effort to put the reductions in place. So to put our own house in order.
Totally agree with that.
And when you talk about India, well, you know, add China, add the United States, and many other places in the world where the emissions are way beyond what New Zealand produces. But if you actually start digging into what's going on in those nations, you'll see that they are actually putting out huge scale green growth projects as well. And like, you know, takes time to turn a wok around. And I know that because I used to steal one. Like you can't turn it on a phone, you gotta take it right around them. Does that help?
Yeah, I just wanted to address that. And this is I think it's really one of the most confronting issues is that Michael talked about India, for example. 80% of the world's resources are consumed by under 20% of the world's population, and that's us in this room. That's the Western world. So this is where it's really confronting because it's us in this room that have to make the big changes, not the people in North Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, where they can, by population, they're huge, but by resource consumption, it's quite small. So I totally get what you're saying about confronting this as people. I support your idea around some sort of hub of information, but that's what we can do. And yeah, I'd like to explore those ideas a bit further of whether that should go through this committee for information sharing or through the wider cross council committee. I'm unsure about that, but we need to start to have those discussions with our community.
Exactly.
Around those issues. So
Any others?
I'll just observe that I believe part of the challenge for information, I use the term information hub versus education hub. To me, we lack education capacity in the true sense of the word. We're not an education provider, but we can be a provider of information. But I think the challenge that emerges is the curation challenge. How do you curate, or how do you enable through an information hub at the bottom line for folks to self-curate? You know, I'm interested in following hashtag topics, therefore from a database of information. hashtag, this is the stuff that's of interest to me. I'm interested in adapting in a farming sense, or I'm interested in adapting in an industrial sense, or I'm interested in what adaptations I can make at home in my own personal life space. So to me, there's that curation challenge in a world of contested information, contested perspectives. We would want to be an element of quality assurance through some sort of committee or editorial curation committee that the stuff we are putting on the line is legitimate, evidence-based, and not subject to challenge that would undermine the wider efforts and result in us being like, you are just, working for the World Economic Forum, we're not going to.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks very much for coming over here, Paul. Very formal. See that we have some initiative that we can follow up from this.
Yes.
And that will happen in due course. We will meet your wishes. But I think what Bill says and what Paul says is really important is that I'm sure that the information we provide is really reliable and in an accessible way as well. There's a huge challenge to see with it. I think that the council really is on the bus. We've got some reports coming up shortly, looking at our progress towards our carbon zero or net zero. So we're certainly, everybody on the council is really trying to make sure that happens. And I'm sure the staff are committed as well. So I hope that you can be reassured that we really are following up on many of the things that we're connected to.
Thank you.
Thanks again for coming.
Yep, no, that's great.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Good luck with your mission. I'll be watching in people.
Yes.
If I feel the need to come back, I will.
Stay.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Thank you very much.
I'll move that we resolve to make the verbal presentation from our.
But is there any intention on doing any more though to that suggestion of at least an information hub? But where to from here with that one? I mean, we talked about, but is it, as I'm saying, is there any intention, because we are in an emergency. I think we've all got to manage that, and I'm quite keen to get that information moving, and I understand that we want the correct information. We want to be able to withstand any challenges that might come to that information too. But I go right back to my days of negotiation with the Ngāi here, the settlement, and we had consultants come on board, and when they were given the true information, they understood the true information, and they really got on board and got them behind the kaupapa all the time as well. And so it's that
you don't know what you don't know, and it's about sharing that information as much as possibly can, and let people take on what they will of it anyway. And I don't.
You might like to recommend that this maybe recommends back to policy and stress committee for a start off on the paper on how what it would look like, what we can actually do.
Can someone not fix that?
Sorry.
Is that you, Michaela? Did you do that?
We got these muted.
Chairman, if I could just say, just while we're fixing it, I think it's a really good idea. But first, I'd like to really establish where communication responsibility should sit with us and this subcommittee or the wider regional group, and you've got all that of all the other contributors. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, and also in the broader kind of spatial strategy space, which organisation it's going to sit with. But actually, at the risk of suggesting yet another workshop, before we, I don't know, whether we need a workshop first before we get staff to bring some thoughts through to us, or whether it's just covering the same. But there's clearly a need for some further discussion around us, this group, and perhaps the wider council around how this might, what our requirements, desires, wishes might be, and how we take this forward. Because I think these are a way, but we need to talk that through. So whether that's a workshop first or a staff bringing things, bringing things together first. I don't know which comes first.
I would like to encourage us to do DOE more so than HUI.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise we'll spend another year sitting here talking about how might we do this. But even if we go slightly wrong, at least we're doing something and people are getting understanding that something's being done. I guess let's not be scared of doing something wrong. Let's just do something anyway. Let's get some movement going.
I'd start off on the website or like the morning Saturday hub.
Yeah.
But even though we were talking about some of that green waste before, I mean, the Mariah's are very good at setting up worm farms, setting up food production, for the whānau. But a lot of cities around the world would be allotments, and some of this waste that's smelling could actually be provided for people to actually grow their own vegetables. We talk about food sustainability. Like there's a whole myriad of things that's moving towards more strategic public transport in the city, for instance. But we've got a lot of urban people aren't that engaged, and we do need to have a bit of thought about where we start to actually get people on. Where are we going to
comment, then Phil, and then
just very quick, and just point to the Great South work that we talked about a little at the workshop last week. So the work that Beyond 2025 are doing is going to be recommending some sort of a portal to share sustainability information across a wide range of topics. And Rachel and I have obviously been discussing with them what that might look like and what would be sensible, because we know that there's similar being asked for in the water space, like how do we share good case studies and what intel that we're getting from farming sector, etc. So I think it's a really good action that we need to be advancing, but I would suggest that the strategy is probably the place to do that. You want to be prioritizing it along with everything else. So that would just
probably aligning with that. I would suggest that the regional working group is racing the clock to a degree to support the needs of the various entities contributing to that. And I don't think an information hub is something that people want to prioritise at this point of their journey. That's what I'm saying. Maybe in the future, but right now it's probably not something that we see as a priority for that regional working group. And we'll speak to our time pressures under a subsequent agenda item. Why that is.
Okay, well, that just answers the question. Maybe there's a real green light going on in this room now that we get on as Stuart talked about. And where we're going to make that first step and can we do it is so important. Going back to what you talked about, the foundations of the information that we put out, it's got to be the on approach, hasn't it?
Robert, did you have a comment?
No, thanks.
Okay. Stuart, is that what we're talking about now? Sort of.
I'm okay. We go there. I'm just keen that we identify priorities and we actually start hitting some of those priorities rather than just keep talking about them, because there's just so much going on around us, and we're not walking the talk yet. We're still walking the talk rather than walking, and there's more and more stuff coming down on top of us. And if I won't say if, but my understanding is that we are actually in a very dire straits at the moment, and we need to be doing something ASAP.
Let's support what Linda suggested, and Linda suggested both around the workshop.
Yeah, okay. There's a couple of layers of stuff going on here. So there's the beyond 2025 strategy work, but there's also, you know, I guess to inform members, the internal stuff that we can, internal work and stuff, and education that we can be doing. So, you know, to follow on from Dylan's work and Noel's input, there are some, you know, step changes that we can initiate right now around education and information and trials, you know, like Dylan was talking about. So I think there's that layer of that we need to thresh out and prioritise and just tick one off. Let's just pick one and, you know, she said, knowing how busy the staff are, and it's not just us. But I think that we have to consider that there are the different layers of meaning and the different layers of action that we can take. And some of it actually is probably quite simple. Don't get tied up in ourselves too much.
Ordered in the minutes from this discussion about all of that.
Well, maybe we need to sit down and actually thresh out what are our top 10 for this committee level. Might be finding an urban fringe dweller who's burning stuff and the smoke comes out of my house. You know, maybe it's them that we introduce to Dylan and we get that going over there, and we've got a, you know, I don't know. Maybe we need a. I don't want to talk this about it.
We need to move beyond the concept stage.
Yeah. Let's actually put some things.
Look, I think with obviously the 2025 information about to come up, we don't want it to duplicate.
No.
We want to do something in the regional space, so something happening there that we can work with rather than setting up something separate. That's fine, but I guess we can think about the things that we can encourage people to be doing. And there's a myriad of things, like, you know, electric buses or hydrogen buses are probably a wee way off, but just the whole spatial strategy we're going to be working through, where you're going to do your houses, where the transport's going to be, you know, out of safe cycle tracks. So there's a whole lot of things that are part of that picture.
That been dealt with in the regional strategy.
So the question kind of becomes which regional strategies that we're referring to, because yeah, okay, so that it's too early for us to say what degree that will be responded to in the first iteration of that strategy. We are still working through what needs to be in that and the time frame available for us. So
could I just say that as your regional group gets up and going, the communications might be something that they take over for a regional flavour, but I think there's a will in this room now to get underway, as Stuart's saying. So could always suggest that we move towards, like Lyndall suggested, a workshop with the communications twist to it, to see how we could, you know, some work done by staff. Yeah, of how we could take that first step and talking to our community. Will I be able to move that, Mr. Chairman? Was that something that we should move?
We'd like to that, Michaela.
Note it as an action.
Yeah, to be brought to the.
Yeah. So, yeah, isn't it? Suggested action.
Just as I'll second that and say that actually this is also an opportunity to activate the people that Noel was talking about who feel it's hopeless. It's an opportunity to give them a wee thing that they can do to help. And it speaks to the wider mental health situation, all this. So, yeah, absolutely. Let's get some projects.
Second, all those in favour of that.
Right.
Right, welcome, Leon. I assume you're going to tell us all of the presentation.
This first one's me, and then I think I'll, yeah, Neil's, I just feel it.
No, I don't know.
You tell me.
Would you like a noise? I'll swap with you because I've got full jersey on. Danger, it's fine. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chair. So, given the timing, and I'm assuming we've got a fair other bits and pieces to get through with my colleagues, so I won't. We'll try and zip through this one, although it's important, and we did want to talk through a little bit of detail. So, Mick, am I in your hands? Thank you. So we talked a little, just mentioned the Beyond 2025 work. One of the streams of work that's been underway that Great South has been working on in partnership with Nuclear Generation is a regional energy strategy. The vision is there on the screen in terms of what the strategy is aiming to achieve and its purpose. A summary version was sent to you with your papers, which hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a quick look at. The full version is more detailed, as you would expect. But the summary does a pretty good job of giving you the headline parts that we want to draw your attention to. They are currently out for consultation and seeking public feedback on the content of the draft strategy. And so I wanted to take this opportunity with yourselves to hook through some of the key points and get your feedback, because the deadline was tomorrow. But they have now extended that time, so we've got a little bit more time to get back to them. So that's good, but we still wanted to take the opportunity with yourselves to get your feedback. So slide next. So I think most of you were at the session or sessions we've had with Beyond 25. Bobby has been and presented to us a few times. So these are the 5 pillars of work that's going on under the Beyond 2025 banner, and the energy strategy kind of sits in a couple of places or assists with a couple of the work streams, and I've just highlighted those. So there's the net zero work that's coming, and also future energy. So I just wanted to highlight that those are kind of the 2 places where this particular piece of research fits in. Thanks, Nick. So I've stolen these slides from them, so they'll look familiar for those who've seen them already, but the regional energy strategy is intended to be a research input into the broader program of work under Beyond 2025, and with the intention to assist with this vision of understanding the current and future demands and supply of energy, and considering both the immediate and long-term challenges and opportunities. So onwards, please. So the energy strategy itself covers a few scenarios around the closure of TY and the environment, obviously acknowledged that it provides energy for and generates energy for as well. So we need to ensure we're making the right calls about how we're fitting all of the different constraints in and how we're weighing up the benefits as well as those costs. So that's what they're trying to do with the strategy. The consultation, there's about 30 questions on the consultation survey. Some of them are less relevant than others for yourselves, that they are seeking public feedback as well on the strategy. So they cover all sorts of topics that are within the strategy. But what I'm intending to do with the next 10-15 minutes is run you through some of those high-level ones that we think are most relevant to our business and to your role in this subcommittee. So we've got, just click one more down. Thanks. So this is one of the first questions in the consultation survey around when you think about South America's energy future, what's important to you. So I hadn't factored this being in this room. I thought we were going to be in the chamber. So what I'm suggesting we'll do, we've got a flip chart and I've got some docs. So Mick will assist us and we'll hand those out. But before you leave after the meeting, if you can place your 3 dots alongside some of the options, there's like a list of 10 options. We've got the flip chart now for us there. And what I want to get from that is kind of a prioritization. So you'll all have 3 dots each, and then I'll be able to see from where your preferences are, what you think is most important, and we'll feed that back as the answer. So just skip on Nick to the next one. So I'll just go one at a time, sorry. So a whole raft of their questions are very binary yes, no's. And so the way that I'm proposing to do that with yourselves is very simply and quickly put up each of the questions, and I've got 5 on this slide, and just take a show of hands, and then we'll take a note of the votes for each, and then if there's a majority of them, that will be the vote that we apply for the survey response. Everybody's happy with that, okay? I hope that we can just run through. So one of the questions is, the first question is achieving a balance between energy supply and demand an important part of energy planning and affordability for South America? Yeah. So I should probably say at this point that most of
Never going to be a yes or no.
most of the questions are complicated and multifaceted, but this is their questions, how they've written their questions.
Should we not have renewable in front of energy?
Which energy?
And we're not writing the question, you're not writing the question though, Eric.
Well, then I have some difficulty in answering it.
I'll say no.
No,
We're a difficult place, but I want the real problem with affordability. Right at the start of our vision, affordable. Let's be honest with people.
I've got a real difficulty with balance.
Yeah. Well, energy is going to be expensive, more expensive than it is now, and I just. Yeah. So, but that's my.
But I think our council challenge is not to rewrite the survey for this crew. Given the survey structure is.
Yes or no?
Yeah,
If-
unfortunately, it's.
or maybe.
Chair, if there's feedback on it, it's fun to get this, because this is what my team do when we're posed with survey questions, because we're planners and we're very into the detail. So that's nice to know it's not just planners who do it, but we can obviously capture a wider range of feedback other than just yes, no. But what I would suggest, given that we've got a little bit more time than we thought we were going to have, is we can do the response to the survey, which is via the public portal, which is obviously literally just tick boxing. But I would suggest, and be in your hands, Chair and Chairman as well, to do a letter or something else which is more comprehensive to say we had additional comments and these are those. So there are open boxes for us to fill in things, but what I pulled out in this first load of questions was intended to wet your whistles a little bit with some simple yes no ones to get the conversation going. So I think the essence of this one is around that. The balance of supply and demand, and it did come up last week in the workshop as well. I think who brought up that need for reduction of you can't keep supplying to the same level if your demand is actually being addressed. So the first part of the question in terms of achieving that balance between supply and demand being an important part of energy planning, yes, no, and then factoring in how affordable that might be. Then kind of jammed in affordability, made it.
I mean, if nobody can afford it, you take it to the extreme, well, that doesn't work, does it? Because
Yeah.
James Shaw was on the national station this morning saying we're going to need 80% more renewable energy to meet demands going forward. So
yeah.
So Lucy,
We need 6 menopause to put it into.
We could get a sense of a yes, no.
Let's see if we can do that.
But then there's the other conversation going back the other way is that a sustainable society will only be working within the supply, and they'll stop talking about the demand, and they'll be working with what's available to them rather than demanding, no, we want more when the supply's not even there. And so I'm just encouraging we might start thinking back that way a little bit too.
Yeah, honest.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from.
Well, I would say yes.
What's your
for the next question. Also, just for a comment, I would like to say there's one quote that's always stuck with me, and it comes from an oil analyst. Said there's no replacement for fossil fuels at the rate which we currently drain them. So that goes talking about demand will have to come down. We're talking about education in this room. That will be part of lowering that demand, and people start to understand what the future is going to be like.
We need to get through this really behind time, so we don't want to debate about the whole topic. We want to say, put your hand up with you think yes or no. Is that what?
That would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeses.
Yeah.
Well, But you've got the majority, that's fine.
Yeah, no,
Do you want me to run through these four that are intended to be simple, because some of them I think will give you an opportunity to answer some of the others, so. Mick,
Pushes
can I just
us ease.
switch on to
Can I-
the next one?
Can I just make the comment I made about supply and demand?
Mm.
Yeah, we've got the data grid coming on stream. And so there goes the new demand. When we read the power supplies goes down, I will say, for one better word, who's going to get cut off? Is the community going to get cut off to allow the data grid to keep operating? Or is the community going to be allowed to keep operating and the data grids going? I know who's going to get cut off, be the community. And therefore the demand, the demanding now, we're not thinking about the consequences of what supply is there and what's capable of supplying for.
So can you take these comments at some stage?
Yep.
Right, okay, next one.
Should planning for new renewable energy generation be a critical part of meeting our needs? Yes.
That answers my question in one, thank you.
Should potential new electricity generation sites be considered as part of the council's district planning and spatial planning process? Yes.
No, it's a wee bit bigger than us there.
Yeah, there's another question in the big survey about, is it everywhere or it's,
Well, the
yes, but where?
The spatial plan is
Part of
the,
your spatial plan.
Yes.
spatial plan is the big,
And then regional spatial.
yeah.
In the context of that question too, this council spends quite a bit of time, we talk about plantation forestry and carbon forestry and constraining that. Are we not going to be constraining an industry that will be critical to meet our energy needs in the future? Is there a balance we're thinking? Do we think about that sort of thing?
But I think the reason it needs to be considered is for that very fact. Oh, we should have left that space for a solar farm, but we went and planted plantation forestry there, or we shouldn't have put forestry on that hilltop, because that's what our wind turbines are optimized for. So,
Yeah.
some of these considerations to me are really obvious. Yes, you would consider it as part of your regional spatial planning.
Well, that's an outstanding landscape, and actually maybe we don't want a whole lot of this.
Maybe we should put houses there.
Or houses here.
Yeah.
Can we move the Jabba so Nikki can't get struggle?
Oh, it's kind of,
It's on a short string.
And that's coming to help.
Maybe.
Okay, so last one is on hydrogen. Hydrogen as a future transport fuel. First part of the question is, are we aware of the potential for hydrogen as a transport fuel?
yes.
And then if yes, do you support the concept of a locally produced green hydrogen as a transport fuel? The less I say about this, I don't know.
No, exploration of such, there's a few things to cross there first.
Potential, I like the word potential.
Yeah.
If we can look forward and say that the technology hasn't arrived yet, we can support that. It's really hard to do, isn't it? Because it's not there, we know that.
But in part, you've already got the Richardson group who trucks on the road, they are blending hydrogen with traditional fuel.
Yeah.
I think the initial thing would actually be producing ammonia, much more stable product. You could actually cut it up and run Huntley. You could do a whole lot of things. Shipping is
Yeah, well, shipping's the big one with ammonia at the moment.
I'm just going to say, for local use. But yes, we do have to, support the, well, we don't have to, we can support the concept as a local.
Yeah.
So we got a.
Might just make a comment that green hydrogen is a critical word there, because most of the world's supply of hydrogen at the moment is from deconstructing fossil fuel. There's very little green hydrogen made around the world. So that's a bit of greenwash unless it is green hydrogen.
Someone else put my hand up to yes.
Who's agreeing with me?
Yeah,
Yeah, Vegemite.
I'm agreeing.
It's the only one. So we say yes. for that?
Yep.
Can we add a subject to understanding of water
Yeah.
consumption implications?
And
So the potential-
waste.
Mind if they can use wastewater and they can desalinate salt water.
I think we're.
So, yeah.
Well, we're talking about the concept.
Yeah.
Concept.
We're not talking about going and
Yeah.
doing it.
That's fine. Make a few comments.
Yeah.
Who's in favour of the concept?
Mm,
Yep.
we need to know more about it.
Who's not in favour of the concept?
Concept, yeah.
Let's just be aware of hydrogen, that it carries on with the same energy supply logistics that we have now. There's a huge weight of pressure to keep going with a fuel as opposed to storage of energy. So I'm sure everyone's aware of that.
Okay, onwards, Michaela, please. So, last week when we talked at the workshop that Bobby and Bex presented to, we discussed this one quite a bit, and so it was more that I wanted to check that I had read the room accurately. So one of the questions is around our energy future will likely require a mix of several generation sources. Should you wish to, there are a number of those that you could tick for. They are the ones that you would imagine them to be. And so it's asking which of the following you support. Last week when we discussed it, I was privy to a number of conversations and a number of tables, and what I have summarised that as is nothing should be taken off the table. We should be thinking about all of the opportunities that exist that are suitable in order to assist us with this challenge. But I wanted to check with yourselves that that reflected the conversation, and if so, I can put that in the little box that's underneath this question. But yes,
Yeah, because once again, this is where spatial planning
yeah,
comes into it, doesn't
absolutely,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's back to the
Diversity.
conversation.
Might also have hydroelectric.
But it's on there. It is on the list. Yeah, it's
It's
just not on the list I've.
Yes.
New hydro is on there.
Yes to diversity of
Okay,
energy.
okay.
Everybody happy with that? Okay, the next, so what I thought we might be able to do in this one, but given your time constraints, the rest of the agenda you need to get through, and given that we've got a bit more time, I'll send these questions to just yourselves and get your feedback. So can you go through all of this for? So what I was going to do is give you post-its on. So these are the open-ended boxes on the thing. What are the one thing you'd like to see us do to ensure energy is clean, resilient, and affordable? Is there an area we need to place more emphasis on? Conversely, an area that they've been placing too much emphasis on, and any topics they've not covered that are important to us. So after today, we'll send those 4 questions just to this subcommittee members, and if you can send your thoughts back to us between our teams, we will switch that into the feedback that we find. Ideally by Monday or Tuesday next week. Yeah. Would be wonderful.
Now, I just want to check with Robert to make sure you're still up with the play. Are you?
Yes, I am. Well, am I up with the play? Yes. And I've just sent a message through, which will go down like a cup of whatever there. Noel mentioned degrowth, and we're not even in the ballpark, or whatever you say. And we need to get someone to talk to us about those options rather than just pushing it to the side and surging ahead with powering up, which is what it seems we're doing right now. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Well, we make sure you get that in your comments.
I did.
So final, we will send those questions around to you, and then next steps from here. So we'll take all the feedback from your yes and no's, the feedback you can get us in answers to those questions, summarize it and submit the feedback to Great South by the end of next week. We'll table the final version of that feedback for the next Strategy Policy Committee, just for FYI. And Rachel and I have got ongoing work happening with Beyond 2025 to assist them and assist us with the finalisation of their plan by the end of June. So, but actually, it's got to be done way sooner than that. So, that's where to from here, Chair. So, thank you very much, and hopefully this will stop.
Can I just take to chair this opportunity to say that we have in my understanding, the greatest mass of migratory seabirds move about in this area. So if we're looking at wind turbines out in the oceans, not just titi, but the other migratory seabirds that move about, and the space is in mass as biggest anywhere in the world. The titi sooty shearwood is the most biggest biomass of seabirds there is in the world. And so I just think we need to have good, fair consideration of the effects, and whether you like minced titi or whether you prefer them as a whole.
So the flight patterns reasonably defined on an annual basis? So
Yes, yeah. Which is the whole of the ocean, basically. That's in search of the food, and they fly to 10, 20 meters in height at a time, and they're on the wing, and they're just searching. So I know it could end up being a bit of a problem for some, but I just think we need. And as I was saying, it's not just the titi, the sooty shearwood we're looking at here. It's all those other petrels and such like that are moving through at the same time.
Thanks, Stuart. Very good point. Right, we've got a recommendation for this report. We note the report and we'll provide feedback, and we're going to do that in the way that Lucy has.
I'll move.
asked us.
I'll second and ask that the individual surveys are still open, aren't they? So we
Yes.
can all leap on this evening and
Yes,
share our individual thoughts also.
yes, and it's been extended until the 9th, I believe.
Oh, for
So
everybody?
I think so.
Oh, okay,
I
good.
think so. There was a mass of people saying they did.
Tim, I have to give it to you.
Aye.
Thank you for your input there. That's,
I want to leave it now. From you.
Just a little alluding.
Swapping them around.
Item 4. Five.
No, you're fine. We can't wait.
Oh,
So we go to into this one, and this is around the organisational facing work that has been underway. So we've got a project stage that this was.
Yes, if you can put the presentation up on page, Taylor. And so I think most people will know Neil Selman, who's going to be doing this presentation jointly with me today. So the end of last year, Neil was contracted to start doing our organisational GHG emissions measurement for our organisation. And so obviously we had a pretty big milestone at the SMP meeting the other day, where this organisation is going to be working towards becoming net zero 2050. A key step to making that happen is first knowing our numbers. And so this sort of like we were halfway through this project, I guess you could say, of working this out and hoping to have some numbers in front of SMP by July, August this year. So today, the purpose of the presentation was really just to give a bit of an update about what we're actually doing, and taking the opportunity to run through a bit of an update on where this is at. And yeah, so there's an opportunity for this committee to engage and ask questions so we can understand the process. So yeah, to start with, you'll be familiar with this diagram in terms of adaptation and emissions reduction. That's how the nice split is in terms of how we're trying to work out our way forward for climate change. So this work sits nicely over on the right-hand side of that diagram in terms of internal measurement of greenhouse gases and then eventually action to reduce those emissions. So why are we doing this? So essentially, there's a whole bunch of bullet points there that are all very relevant. We need to understand our current impact. We need to work out what is actually causing our emissions, identify them and measure them. We will then use that information to inform and prioritise our emissions reduction activity. And we did say we were going to work through some sensible and achievable emissions reductions actions, but so knowing those numbers is important to that. And then eventually ongoing measurement will mean that we're measuring our emissions reduction progress and working towards our net zero goal of 2050. So this is all in the space of Environment Southland walking the talk. We want to set ourselves up as a leader in this climate change space. So this is a very brief slide that illustrates the process for measuring organisational emissions. So we looked at consultants to help us through this process. There's some very well-known consultants in this field like ECOS and Tuitu, which, you know, this is their main business. But what we worked out is that regardless of whether we get a key consultant like that to help us, we really need to get on this journey ourselves and understand, and, you know, it's an organisational learning curve here that needs to happen. And so we decided that the best place to start was the MFE detailed guide. And so basically, as a way forward instead, this is where we've engaged Neil to do the work for us. Neil's got the benefit of knowing our organisation quite well. And so essentially Neil's in the process of, he's very familiar with the detailed guide now, but stepping through step 2, 3 and 4 and up to 5 is sort of halfway through that process at the moment. So in the wider context, we also, as part of looking at consultants, we looked at whether we can align with our partner agencies on this straight away. What we found was each agency needs to really get on this journey themselves to start with and then work towards alignment as we go. So this is where the City Council were further ahead in the sense that they've already established their baseline, but that's helpful for us because we can learn from them. But ourselves and SDC are sort of on the same track at the moment, and GDC is looking at this quite closely too to hopefully get onto this journey very soon as their resources allow as well. So this is where I hand over to Neil. One of the key steps in the organisational emissions and measurement process is firstly determining our organisational boundary. That was, sorry, go back to that one, sorry, Michaela. So this is where we did that interagency group. We did set up a bit of a group that specifically focuses on these processes, because what was really helpful is working out our organisational boundary in relation to our other agencies. So there are lots of things that fall in between our agencies, and, you know, making sure that we're counting things in the right place and not double counting and not missing things. And so that's essentially where that interagency communication has been really helpful to that. And yeah, I guess I hand over now to Neil to take us through the detail.
Thank you, Anka. So the intention today is a bit of a starting the education. So please ask questions. So we're just doing a bit of a quick overview over what we're doing as an organisation in terms of establishing our greenhouse gas baseline. We've got plans for taking you into more and more detail going forward. So just, however, so if you've got some more detailed questions, file them off. I think it's it's about passing that information on and doing the learning. So as Anka said, that there's our version of our organisational boundary. The importance of establishing an organisational boundary so that we know what's in and what we're going to account as part of our baseline, and consequently also we know what's out. And that's useful for us, but then also when you aggregate at a regional level means that entities are not being double counted and what have you. A couple of the key concepts that underpin this is that the literature says, and when I say literature, so there's ISO documentation and there's MFE documentation, which we're working off. It says that there are two ways that you can define your organisational boundary. That is over, that is control or so that's it could be, well, there's two ways to do it. One is control and one is equity share. So control is you incorporate 100% of that entity. Equity share is obviously you divvy it up and you say, look, you own 30% of that entity, so you'll have 30%, blah, 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 Within the control area there, you can choose between whether that's financial control or operational control. So as an interagency group, we've agreed that we believe that control is the best option, and within that is the operational control. So we've defined that a little bit further to say, look, if we've got the ability to set policy, health, safety policy, environmental policy for the entity, then that should be within our boundary. And that sort of does come down to who has the deciding control, who has control, to make decisions, and hence that's where the emissions sits. So you see on the outside there, we've for completeness, we've set out like Southport, Regional Software Holdings. These are entities that ES has some ownership of, but we do not have operational control. So they sit outside of our footprint. And then we've got some trust there again. For completeness, we have some governance and we have some influence, but we don't have control. What we've suggested within the principle is that where we don't have operational control and it's not within our footprint, we would still try to use our influence to encourage those other entities to do their own greenhouse gas emission reporting.
Just not worried about the Southport thing, but where it's operational control. Thanks.
Yeah. So obviously we could argue that we have financial control by virtue of that. Well, we can't argue that actually, but we do have it, the 66% equity share, but we still don't have really financial control and or operational control. So
those sort of entities are going to have their own.
That's right. And being part of the NZX, they're going to be first cab off the rank really when it gets mandated. Thanks, Garth. So just to sort of take you through fundamentally the steps, define boundaries, which we just looked at, you understand that. So then it's defining the sources. Now, sources are essentially are the actions that generate an emission. So the easy one to understand, and I'll sort of take you through an example to help to sort of solidify the learning is driving a combustion engine that burns gas. That's an action that generates an emission. The next stage, so what we do is we go throughout the organisation, we define all of those actions that we do that will generate an emission. MFE have created and identified emissions factors, and so we're really just applying their tables, which is great because they've done the science boffin stuff in terms of actually saying making it simple or easier, I should say, for us to then look at what the units are and apply them to their factors to say, here is what the emission output is. Then we build an inventory, then we gather data. Gather data is essentially the activity. So if you think in terms of defined sources as the action, the gather data is the activity. So how much of it have we done? Put that into the model, and this is going to create a view of what our emissions baseline is. It's calculation, validation, or validate, and then external verification reporting. And it is a bit of rinse and repeat. This will be an annual process of like whilst we're doing the baseline, the whole intention behind this is creating a measurement system so we continue to do it. So then we can track the fact that we're getting better, or dare I say, getting worse. Thank you, Kayla. So just one thing I want to clarify too is you hear us, we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, and it's we're not using carbon, CO2, or what have you. And I guess just to sort of set up, fundamentally there are 6 primary greenhouse gases that are incorporated within this piece of work. The main ones that affect us are obviously you do have carbon dioxide, and then there's methane, and then there's nitrous. There are a number of then refrigerant and medical gases too, and we will be capturing those when they occur. But that's not something that's going to have a major impact on us or on our footprint. But just to sort of set that out, so one of the things you'll see is that that carbon dioxide is used as I guess the baseline standard, and the other gases are presented as being a carbon dioxide equivalent, so you can aggregate the impact of all the gases. It's all based upon what is the global warming potential of the gas, and so you will see like methane, so a litre of methane has the same global warming potential as 25 litres of carbon dioxide. 25 kg of carbon dioxide. So, each gas has a different impact. But you will see it when they're aggregated together, you'll see it expressed as carbon dioxide equivalent. So you'll see the CO2 with a little E on the back of it. So that's the equivalent impact. So it's all based on the carbon dioxide. Can't quite see, but so then we've got the reporting categories, and then on the outside that says reporting sources or emission sources. Sorry, and so that's looking at the primary types of emissions or I guess activities that we have within the organisation that will generate emissions. And so you can have a look. So fuel. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's get on. So fuel in terms of burning gas. A lot of it's burning wood fire, boilers, and you've got refrigerant gases. The only that we've identified at this stage for us would be if there is a gas escaping out of any of our heat pumps. So that could be a possibility. And whilst we do talk largely about emissions, there is also obviously reductions of emissions, and so that's when you have like forestry. Our forestry activity does reduce emissions. Won't get into the detail yet, but it's for the next meeting. But there is obviously a cyclical nature to a forestry. You grow the tree, then you harvest the tree. When you harvest the tree, the way that the system works is that growing and the harvesting offset each other. There is no net benefit from forestry.
What would depend what the end use of biomass was.
Yeah. The way that the MFE stuff does it, no, and they have a 100-year lens, and so what they're, I guess, inferring is that you harvest that tree regardless of what the use is. That over 100 years, that emission is going to be released back into the atmosphere. That's the way that they work. We're going to talk a little bit, get some more detail about forestry in our next session.
So are they saying you have to plant more trees to offset that?
Yeah, or do something like native forest. Yeah. So to be honest, so in terms of for us, so let's chat a little bit more about that. So in the first instance, it's on all organisations to reduce their emissions, and then when you'll only ever reduce so far, and then it's to look at offset, and so you're potentially then planting more trees and increasing the nature of forest or the forest size will then offset your main emissions. Yeah, thank you. So then just to look at, again, this is relating back to that previous screen, and just sort of working through an example. As I said, fuel use, it's one of our major sources. So obviously I'm picking on the Master Ute because we've got a few of them running around. So that box, that table is cut from MFE's emissions factor. So what that's effectively saying is that for a litre of diesel used, it generates 2.69 kgs of CO2 equivalents, and that's where you see like you got CO2 then and methane and nitrous. So if you appreciate that, for every litre, and that sort of surprised me, every litre of petrol or every litre of gas, you're generating 2.69 kg of carbon dioxide. So then consequently, if we said, and so we'll gather data and we'll be getting it from our fuel cards and invoices. So a lot of the activity will come through from invoices. So like in this instance, so if you say that one ute, drive and takes 100 litres of diesel a month, calculate that's 260 kgs carbon dioxide equivalent per month, or 3.2 tonne per annum. So those numbers I find reasonably staggering.
Does the age of the vehicle factor into it as well?
It can, but moreover, the more modern the vehicle is, the more efficient it is. But burning gas is burning gas.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is based on burning the gas. So you might, so with a more modern depot, you might have travelled more k's, more kilometres, but you're still burning, you know, you might still end up, you know, if you're burning gas is burning gas.
So this will be based on the efficient vehicles, wouldn't it?
No, so that's what I'm saying, Stuart, sorry, is burning a litre of diesel is burning a litre.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In a more efficient vehicle, you will travel through. But this is not based on travel, this is based on the amount of fuel consumption.
Yeah. And you know, earlier on, we're talking about sharing information with the community. Well, it's this sort of stuff that we need to be sharing with them. You know, like I've got a diesel vehicle at home, and I've stopped driving it because I'm now aware.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just this stuff that people need to get out and get.
I find it quite stunning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
100 litres a month per vehicle might be an understatement.
Yeah, well, so, yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah.
That's about what I burn a week.
Yeah, so you're about 12.2, 12.
Well, I'm really, I do have a lot of trees.
How much is the hectare of that? Yeah, how much is the hectare of trees off?
That's for the next session.
Trees will grow. So trees.
Can I have some of your
Yeah, so
trees?
you're right.
Yeah. I'm not talking range.
Just time, so just keeps us moving along. The organisational baseline work that Neil's doing, it's like literally 3 sheets of work. Category 1 and 2 is just about there, apart from some validation figures in the forestry side of things. But the actual rounding up of all the categories, we're hoping to have that done by July this year and in front of you guys mid-year. So then we'll have to have a verification of those figures because we want to have confidence in the figures, especially when we're going out to the community with these. We want to be able to know that these figures do stack up and how Neil's done the work is, you know, on track. And so as part of this, like we've already spoken briefly about this, the reduction opportunities, we're working through that, researching that at the same time. Do you want to skip to the next slide, Taylor? So that's the, we'll put this in front of you briefly before about the fact that we need to develop this emissions reduction pathway for our organisation. And so, yeah, filling in the blanks will happen as soon as we're kind of balancing out that with the actual figure side of things as well. Just the last slide. Okay, so just to mention, as a slight aside, in terms of related happenings, we've one of our LTP targets is that we need to be rolling out a climate change perception survey with our community. And so there's some significant work being done on that at the moment. We think we're just about there with the draft survey. And our proposal is that we run this internally because we're quite keen to set an internal baseline in terms of understanding of climate change and the impact of climate change as well, because at the end of the day, as an organisation, we also need to take a shift in the same way that the community need to make a shift. So that hopefully that internal pilot will be rolling out very soon, and then the idea is that the community survey will be rolling out towards the end of the financial year. So that's work in progress at the moment, and communications planning. And so I've been really, you know, that this has been a subject of discussion already today, but all of those comments that you were making, I'm very aware of the need to pull that together in terms of here I've got the bullet point communications planning thinking of this project, but actually it needs to be wider as well in terms of the community and how that it needs to roll out. So especially when you think about in the adaptation space, there's a lot of information collection and modelling that still needs to happen, yet the communication with our community is something that can, you know, action can take place in the meantime on that. So you're very aware of that, and you're heartened by the conversations today on that. And the last one, which is also an LTP target, is the youth mechanism for engagement in the climate change space. So yeah, that's also something I just wanted to note as a bullet point to say, very aware that this is on our list of things to do, and so just, yeah, trying to make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you, that's very good. So I think that really answers a lot of the questions that we're asking and concerned about. But it's any one or two times before we over time or the over time, so
One really quick, so do we, with your intention to come up with a couple of different transitionary pathways, you could say, for the organisation, and how will that fit within an interim target? Will you ask us to do a target and then develop a pathway to that? Or
Yeah,
what comes first, or what will you ask us?
Yeah. In terms of what comes first, it's I don't know if there's going to be a couple of transitionary pathways, but it will be something that we'll need to workshop through with you once we've got more figures around some of those reduction measures. So that's in terms of knowing whether how achievable they are. It does come down to the value of how much reduction it can make as well, and costs associated with that. So yeah, that's where a chunk of this time at the moment is researching. It's a massive research project at this point in time, so that we can present those as options for you guys to consider.
thanks. Robert, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I really like, especially I like the last slide about the questionnaire going out to the community and staff and so on. But will that questionnaire be presented? Will the councillors answer that questionnaire, and will we be able to investigate, look at what we've said amongst ourselves with regard to those questions? But what I'm trying to say is, can we get specific, put our line in the sand individually, and then look at where we sit? Because I think that that's the core of an important core of this issue, is being on the same page, knowing what each other actually think. And I think a questionnaire like that could be very valuable.
Now, what questionnaire are you talking about?
The climate change perception survey.
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean.
Right.
Yes.
Right, thanks, Robert. Yes, well, Stuart.
Can I just ask, you were talking about a cost of going in a certain direction, strategy, you might decide to move. You're also doing cost of, if you didn't go there, the alternate costs. Because I think we need to be having a look at that. If you don't go there, then what is that cost going to be anyway? Oh, yeah.
I think probably more practically, like your vehicle fleet, what's the cost if we replace them more than 2 years as to 5? Those are the sort of practical discussions we have. So the speed as opposed to the cost, those are the choices we have to make.
Right, any other questions or comments? Okay, so we are back into this item, which is on page 45. Item 4, as recommended that the subcommittee not resolve to note this report.
I need a move on second.
Oh, yes, we can give my.
I'll move.
Yes, Eric and Peter.
All
David.
right.
Thanks, Eric.
I'll keep going, Peter.
Now we go back to item 3, and thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Really good. Good to see you again. Take it easy.
Yeah, we've got some solar panels all over the roof, it might stop leaking, we won't have to replace them.
Right, item 3.
The water that runs off, we turn into hydrogen.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I'll do this very, very quickly. Item 3, pretty much can take it as read, and I'm relaxed about that, because essentially it's an eased version of what's going to be an interagency report that's presented to the SMP committee at the next SMP meeting. It just hasn't been stepped through all the necessary approvals to be presented as an interagency report at this point in time. So I've created an eased version. So if there's any concerns with the report, we can always cover that off at the SMP meeting.
Okay. Yeah, look, thank you for that. Is there real energy in the other agencies to do something, or are they just filling in their attendance register?
So,
No, there is a genuine and authentic desire
Cool.
to provide guidance to our region.
Right.
And within that, our organisations, the respective organisations,
Good.
as to how do we both mitigate and adapt for climate change. And I think this, what I'm reading is that there's a desire. One of the issues in the report was that, ICC flagged, we need information by July to be able to start working it into our long-term plan to then trigger the public consultation around investment in climate change adaptation mitigation.
Thank you.
So that speaks to my earlier comment as to why we're racing the clock a little bit, because there's this first or initial desire to get some information produced from the regional working group that TAs can take to their long-term planning process by mid-year, or start working it into their long-term planning process from mid-year onwards.
In a sense that when you're talking about communication, if we were to achieve the ambitious goal of aligning communication across our LTPs, across our agencies, then that would be the first step towards communication on this generally across our agencies. And so that's where in the interim, the LTP process, I guess, is quite a key driver, but keeping in mind the fact that communication with our community in a broader sense is probably essentially an essential part of it too in the medium term.
So on that note, Chairman, the survey, although it's a baseline for us, are we looking at actually surveying the other partners in the regional to see what is that relevant? B, could we do that?
I would suggest it might be something we offer them.
Yeah.
Invite them where we are planning to do the survey, both internally and externally. You may offer them the opportunity to use it internally themselves if they felt that would support their organisation.
As key target audiences, where it would be really interesting to see different baselines.
Yeah.
Just
well, it should be a responsibility as an entity to share information.
They may have done something similar
not
already,
only
I don't
TAs,
know.
but other similar type, or not similar business, but other business too. If we, there's some commercially sensitive stuff probably in operations there, we have to be careful with, but it would be a really good tool to show other people this is the pathway that we've used. That's something.
I think we've got a really good chair of that group, and Phil and Dean as well. So I've got a lot of confidence that will be good. I mean, you guys will push it along. I talked to something I think we're watching about joining those by Zoom meetings. And I don't think you've set that up already, but I think that would be quite good. And some of us who are interested, I won't be able to be at the next one, unfortunately, but some of us might have that opportunity. No, it's certainly an important group and really important that we all are aligned. Okay, so we've got a recommendation to talk.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
And Phil, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And well done, that's a great piece of.
Yeah.
Stuff together. See, well done, it's really good.
So we are building on basically we go quickly, go along, if we want to go far, so with many. Probably one.
I think that's better.
Item 5,
Final item, sorry.
I'll keep you on track.
Information plan.
It's actually just a very brief update, noting that at lunch subcommittee meeting, a request was made that staff prepare a plan, how we bring information on climate change issues to council. So the first step towards that has been including additional climate change information in strategy and policy committee agendas, but we will bring back a more comprehensive plan to you in due course. That's still progress.
Okay. I'll move.
In favour of that.
Aye.
So thank you for today. I had a read of the Climate Change Commission report, smaller than larger. Obviously, it's quite a big report, but if you haven't had a look at that, I recommend that you do. It's very good. There's been quite a lot of information in the media about it. A lot of focus on planting trees is not going to solve our problems, but there's a lot of other stuff in there as well that's really worthwhile. So I think they will, you know, as an education tool for us to become more aware of the things that we need to do. Obviously, the Climate Change Commission is very authoritative, and you know that Rod Carr, some of you heard speak here, is really good value. So, you know, I can recommend that. A good bit of bedtime reading.
Through you, Chair, there's actually a consultation period which is running through to the 20th of June, and it may be possible for us to get onto commission staff or a member to talk to us if there was interest in that.
To this committee.
Yeah,
Probably good to try and involve the other councils.
Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a note about your comment about planting trees is not the answer, or whatever it was you said. I think what I know what Rod Carr was saying is it's not the only answer. And I think there's an important difference, because if we say flippantly planting trees is not the answer, it dismisses so much potential that tree planting does have. So I just urge a little bit of caution around how we report back on that. I don't mean to criticise you. You ran a very good meeting.
Yeah, that's fair comment. He said that we can't solve the problem by just planting trees.
Well, its main focus is around the emissions trading scheme and getting that unit price well north of $100. And if we have too many trees, too many units, which drives the price down, and then, you know, the emitters won't transition.
And it's about behaviour change rather than just.
Yeah, no, I thought I was encouraged by that.
Right, so thank you very much to the staff today for the little challenge getting through. We've had some interesting discussions. So thanks again.
Cool.
Thank you.
Lovely.